Before I introduce myself, I'll tell you why I'm nervous. When I was a 19-year-old student at Loyola University in 1986, excuse me, I had a professor who was a graduate of 35. And he told me as much history as he could. And I ignored it. And I didn't pick it up again for 29 years.
Who was that?
Isaac Belanger.
Oh, yeah.
Dr. Belanger graduated in 1964, and I was a student in his world history class, and I had my 35 shirt on one day, and he was like, oh, well, let me tell you some things. And when you're 18 and in college, it went, psh. So then when I joined the Alumni Association and we knew our centennial was coming up, I said, oh, I just need to, let me find a collection of 35 stories. So as my husband will attest, sometimes angrily, I would spend summers, weeks of my summer in the main library, the third floor main library, looking at microfilm. And you have to be strong to look at microfilm. Months and months and months, which I would then say, it took a year to do it, but it took weeks upon weeks upon weeks because I was teaching. And then when I presented my findings to the Alumni Association, I was like, oh, congratulations, you're now our historian. For which at first I was like, oh, that's cool. And then people started asking me more questions. I was like, wait a minute. And so it's blossom, mushroom, invaded. But I would not have it any other way. So I am very proud to be a go-to source, because there are many other go-to sources, but I guess, and I have to attribute it to my father, who somehow knew that his baby daughter at 2 months old was going to go into history. I will explain that little one later, because it kind of goes into why I have all of these albums and different things. So my name is Wanda Romaine. I am a 7th Ward girl, graduate of McDonough 35, graduate of SUNO, 24 years teaching in 3 different states, every age group from pre-K to senior high school. And I've survived it all. As I like to say, I've been cussed out in 5 different languages, including sign. But I've also gotten some of the wildest education experiences ever by traveling away from Louisiana. As in the time I found a 35 graduate in New Mexico, which like, oh wow, that's like finding a Saints fan in Alaska, which I know they have now. So I'm happily married. I have 1 son who's 30. I have 9 stepchildren, which means I have to remember 9 sets of information, birthdays, anniversaries, and graduations. I tend to talk a lot. I love my football. I love music. I love history. In fact, my dad knew history because when I was 2 months old, he had a book something like this. That was dated October 1967. This is 2 months after I was born. And it said, one day I hope my new baby girl finds this helpful. I didn't get the book until 2008. It survived Katrina. Everything else went away. That book survived Katrina. That's when I should have done the history piece, so that way it wouldn't feel so weird to me. But then it also led me to do a collection of 35's history, because the one thing I knew, nothing about McMain, but we all know who 35's biggest headache is St. Aug, and they'll all the graduates tell me, well, we used to beat your team and blah, blah, blah. It's like, you are 35 years younger than 35. Shut up. We are almost old enough to be your grandparents. Shut up. And you date our girls.
Yes.
And you date our girls, so you must know what the good material is. And I would have, even my own father would say, oh, our school used to beat up 35. I was like, yeah, but we've turned the tables now. And so that got me thinking, okay, I had people give me all kind of grief about going to 35, or they'll congratulate me. So I'm like, I gotta get this story straight. So that's how the research and the compiling things and everything else has come about. Names. But if anyone who is familiar with John McDonough, how about we do a tag team and say what we know about him, and you can fill in the gaps.
He was a New Orleans businessman. I don't remember exactly when he died in the 1800s, but he donated his property to build public schools in New Orleans.
That's pretty much all he is. But he was actually born in Baltimore. Moved to New Orleans, maybe 1820s. Did leave half his property to New Orleans, which was $1 million in 1850, which if you fast forward and do the adjusted for inflation is now 37 point something million dollars. He has kind of a sordid history as far as with slavery and things like that, but we're not gonna, that's a story for another day. But when he left the $1 million to the Orleans parish to have schools open, I don't know if it was true that he had to have them named after him. I don't remember seeing that in the documents, but they just wound up being named for him. Orleans Parish sat on their lovely little butts for decades before they started using the monies to open schools to African Americans, because John McDonough stated in his will, all races, all classes should be educated. And Orleans Parish school system said no. It would take about 40 years before 20 years before the first McDonough school was opened. Just McDonough school. Before McDonough 35 was opened in 1917, on the corner of South Rampart and Girard, that's where there's a parking garage right now. That school was called McDonough 13. And the parents of McDonough 13 were not happy to have their school be given to blacks, or Negro at the time. They fought it tooth and nail for a year. And why did they fight it tooth and nail for a year? Because at one time, there were 3 private colleges that served African Americans once they finished 8th grade. So where was high school? Non-existent. So you could be a young, poor black kid who's going straight from 8th grade to college. Private college. Where you had to pay. I couldn't tell you what the tuition payments were, but given that half of New Orleans residents were making, I would say, the equivalent of maybe $10,000 over the course of a lifetime, who had money to pay to go to college? Now, who is familiar with Xavier Prep or St. Catherine Drexel Prep? Okay, so you know where it's at, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, believe it or not, that was the first campus of Southern University.
Oh my goodness.
And it had a high school department. You still had to pay, but it was cheaper to go. Well, they moved in 1914. So what do you still have? No high school. It would literally take a group of citizens 3 or 4 years to get 35 open. So if you look on your timeline, you're going to see the first one should say 1850. John McDonough leaves half of his estate. You'll see 1913, the Colored Educational Alliance lobbies the school board to open a public high school that serves kids beyond 8th grade, because actually in New Orleans, once you stopped at 8th grade and you were a black kid, that was it. You either went to college or you worked. The next thing says Southern University, which was located in uptown New Orleans, moves to Baton Rouge, and it took its high school with it. So it would be 67 years after John McDonough dies and leaves his will to have a high school, public high school dedicated to African Americans. 67 years. And that's where the story now starts really getting interesting, because there was a lawsuit filed by the community of McDonough 13. They did not want to give up their building. It was on the edge of what is now Storyville, but they were safe. They did not want to give up their building. The Orleans Parish School Board eventually gave in and said, okay, let them in. Now I want you to imagine if you're 6 years old and if you're 16. The building that McDonough 35 occupied was an elementary school, which means it had elementary sized desk, elementary sized cafeteria, no gym, no place to play, nothing like that. And yet from there, this person's going to be mad at me, but I don't care. No gym, no big time cafeteria, no science labs for kids between the ages of 14 and 17. They spent $0 to outfit it for high school kids. And yet, for 25 years, before Booker T. Washington opened, we produced every teacher that taught in black elementary schools. We taught the doctors, we taught the lawyers, we taught the business people, we taught the police. the first black cops came from 35. Judges came from 35 for 25 years. In those 25 years, there were lots of struggles. Lots of struggles. So do y'all want to hear the struggles or the victories first? Okay, so one of the struggles was after 1 year, Principal John W. Hoffman, who is, I think he's listed in the 1926 where it says he passes away. John W. Hoffman had to build a library. He had to build science labs. He had to build the athletic department. He had to build the music department. Luckily, he was, for lack of a better word, gangster enough to do it. So at one point, McDonough 35 students grew their own food, sewed their own clothes, cooked their own food in the cafeteria, provided like groundskeeping around the area, because they were taught not only Latin, chemistry, things like that, they were taught vocational skills, housekeeping skills, culinary, all that, for 25 years. In that same 25 years, they had their college prep status threatened. In 1923, they threatened to take out chemistry, physics, and Spanish. That one's on there too, sorry. They threatened to take out chemistry, physics, and Spanish, because our kids were excelling. They said, okay, if we give you back college, those classes, we're taking something away. That was OPSB's thing. We're going to give you something, but we're going to take something away. We're going to give you something, we're going to take something away. And they know it.
I mean OPSB, the Orleans Parish School Board.
It was always a struggle for them to say, we're just going to be a system that's going to, with fidelity, serve you as a community of learners. To this day, they still don't. A moment. Sorry. Okay, there we go. But when you're the only high school that's serving a specific population, and you know that those students have been matching your other scholars score for score and skill for skill, you start playing dirty. I wish I had bought the paper to say this. Who here knows how money works? If you give me more than you give another person, who should win? The person that has more money. So if I tell you that for every $1 a student at McDonough 35 got, a student at Warren Easton got 7, which in 1923 was a hell of a lot of money.
And Warren Easton was an all-white school. at that
Warren
time.
Easton was not only all white, it was all boys. Because what I found out was that Orleans Parish did not gender integrate on gender lines until the 50s. McDonough 35 does have the distinction of being the first public high school to educate boys and girls together
Did it do that from the beginning?
from the beginning. And the reason I'm kind of at it is that one of the parts about doing this with y'all that is both pleasing and bittersweet is that for the first 10 years of McDonough 35's history, there's no yearbook and there's no newspaper to have all this done. No student-produced yearbook, no student-produced newspaper. We had to rely on the Times-Picayune or the Louisiana Weekly, which thank goodness was one of our sponsors, was down the street, and they did everything they could to report, which is where I got 90% of my information. So if I were to pass this around to y'all, this is stuff from just different sources, but 90% of my work comes from the Louisiana Weekly, because they care. I could go on with racism forever, but I'm gonna stick with the history timeline. And if y'all have any questions, jump on in. So yeah, they gave us something, they took it back. They underfunded us, we still succeeded. In 1926, our principal died. First week of school.
It's Mr. Hoffman.
Mr. Hoffman. And somewhere in my computer collection, I even have the article that talks about the first week of school in 1926, early September 1926, Mr. Hoffman passes away. So a couple of weeks later, there's a gentleman by the name of Lucian Alexis who becomes who becomes principal and stays principal for 27 years. Between the time that Mr. Alexis came on in 1926, and I would say up until the early 30s, McDonough 35 suddenly grew up a little bit. And they were like, yeah, we can take on all these challenges. Yeah, we can take on all of these social issues. As the reputation of the school started growing, we had a famous visitor. If I share this with y'all, it's just gonna be between us, right?
Oh, we wouldn't tell anybody.
And I'm so sorry I didn't bring the paper, but George Washington Carver visited 35 in May of 1932.
And May when?
May of 1932. I really want to say it was either the 16th or 17th of May. I have the newspaper. I have a copy of the newspaper article.
Oh, for the exhibit, that'd be great.
And apparently inspired a new wave of science excellence at 35, because for the next 2 years they held science lecture series. And I don't mean let's build a model of the solar system and watch it spin. It was physics, chemistry, advanced science. I wish I had a program to show y'all, and I'm not even a science student. But when I met one graduate from 1955, whose mother was at 35 in 1932. And she was like, my mother bragged to her friends that she met George Washington Carver. Like, if Neil deGrasse Tyson, and that's the scientist I like, if Neil deGrasse Tyson ever came to 35, I would be like, snap, snap, snap. That's how big it is to me. So I can imagine these kids knowing who George Washington Carver is, having him in the school, listening, being entertained. I would geek out. Like I said, I'm not a science person. And so things started getting a little better, even through the Depression. Because one of the things that 35 didn't have, like I told you, they didn't have the yearbooks, they didn't have newspapers, but from 1928 through 1932, they had yearbooks and newspapers. So that's how we know.
To 1932, did you say?
1932, well, the first yearbook was 1928. And that should be on there too.
Uh-huh.
And because I was a newspaper person, the newspaper came out in 1927. So, just as a side shot, this is my yearbook with my lovely picture in it. This is me right here. Just pass that around. Most of 35's yearbooks had that strong leather maroon cover. That yearbook survived Katrina. Untouched. Unblemished. Everything else, grimy. That stayed.
Wow.
That stayed fresh and clean. So when yearbooks would come out, you'd see all these great stories. You'd see all of these artistic kids come out. We did. When I say we, y'all know I didn't do none of this. But my school was able to produce operettas, plays, concerts. And hopefully one day, if I get this straight, they would write their own superhero series about the Ron Eagle. Please don't ask me what it is. Because I get so tired of that story. But they would produce the tales of the Ron Eagle, who's our hero and our mascot, and what that does. It explains in a superhero way all of the injustices that our students faced and conquered. So y'all can read those, or just pass them around. I have like multiple copies of it.
This is cool.
So we're into the 30s. The Depression is still what it is. There's a young man that comes out of there. His name is Max Spears. Max Spears is about the size I am now with my heels on. So he might have stood 5'7". He was a scrawny little kid from Wilson, Louisiana, East Feliciana Parish. He was an only kid. Sharecropper parents. He moves at age 11, moves to New Orleans. He goes to 35 when he's 16. He graduates in 3 years. Mr. Alexis is his principal. We're going to fast forward to 1954. Guess who now becomes the principal?
No. That's crazy.
He's the principal, and he takes over from his old principal. That's why I want a time machine. I want that story. I want that story so bad. I can imagine Mr. Alexis looking at Max Spears be this tall as a kid and now maybe a little bit taller, coming in with the term doctor in front of his name and assuming the principalship. If I ever got a time machine just for that, I want to see that story. But it would be Dr. Spears who would lead 35 into the 35 that a lot of people now know. Because I'm not saying anything important didn't happen in the 40s, but the 40s was dominated by World War II. A lot of, especially young men, going up service, they come back, they try to finish high school. It's just a rough decade. And for 10 years, McDonough 35 has no yearbooks. So it would be 1944 before we got yearbooks. Only 44, 45, 46. So if anybody wants to do some math, how many yearbooks between 1928 and 1932? 5. How many yearbooks? In the 40s? 3. So in 35's first 25 years, there was only 8 yearbooks. A couple of newspapers. That yearbook, that memory book you have, some other students have their yearbooks and things like that. And that's the way I can cover the 40s. For anyone who say like their grandparents or something graduated in the 40s, if the Louisiana Weekly has their graduation announcements, we can find them.
She has her pictures.
Then I need to talk to her. I'll explain that later. But like I said, the 40s was a rough decade. When 35 moved into the building on South Rampart and Girard, the address was 655 South Rampart Street. The building that they moved into had been finished in 1882. 35 moved into it in 1917. How old was the building when 35 moved into it?
35.
35. When I did that math,
Their history, they don't know anything about math.
well, I also majored in business, so
It's a
it's all.
sign. It's a sign. 35.
And when I told my friends that, they were like, that is not true.
Yeah,
And when I showed them the records, they was like, you have got to be kidding me.
35.
And they said that down at 35 moved into a 35-year-old building. And when I taught my kids that, they were like, that's so dope, because that's how teenagers are. That's why I would love to have them here. But yeah, that's, like you said, it was a rinky-dink building. It was already deteriorating by the time they put 35 in there.
And the numbers of students they put in there. Oh my
The first
gosh.
year of 35 had 150 students. The next year had 700.
In a building built for 150 or 200.
It might have been built for 400, but still,
It's amazing.
it's 400 high school kids. 35 used to have a night school. Night school attendance was over 2,000. I still don't see how they got that built. The new campus now can't hold 2,000 kids. But yeah, 40s and 50s, interesting times. I wouldn't know that much because there are no yearbooks. Then come the 60s. Civil rights generation, all the laws, the changing,
Hey.
sorry, the changing of times. I was born in '67, so I'm kind of in a tricky place as far as 35 history goes. The yearbook comes back to 35 in 1965 after a 17-year absence, which means all the history that I get from 35 comes from graduates. And any tidbit of information that's in the weekly and the Times. Yes, ma'am?
Upstairs actually has a 1946 one.
Okay, I need to look that one
So if you ever
up.
want to see it, you can just email them and they're more than happy to get it out for you. But that's the only 40s.
That's
And
the
it
only-
does start back in the 60s.
Right, it starts back in the 60s. I'll put it to you like this. My mother was born in 46 and graduated in 64. So for my mother's young lifetime, there were no yearbooks. But then the 60s come around, we finally get a yearbook. People are starting to archive their left behind memories. And then comes Hurricane Betsy.
Yeah.
September of 1965.
We have that picture of the wall down and after Betsy. Do you have that picture? 'Cause
I bet
could
I
use your
do,
copy.
but I would appreciate another
We'll send
copy
it to
just
you.
because I thought I was gonna have to be moving from my house, and I had to pack up all of my collection, and I don't know where that picture is.
We can get you a copy if you want to.
And Hurricane Betsy destroys a building that's already old as the dickens. And about 30 years of 35 memorabilia is lost. Just,
There you go.
ooh, I don't have that one. Oh, okay, not that that's cool, but that's cool. That's a cool
That's
pic.
after Betsy.
That's after Betsy. Just the whole wall, just like Betsy just said, let me just take this wall and go.
Yeah.
And you could see where the desks were still not adequate for high schoolers after nearly 50 years. So, a few of the students go in and they take bricks from the campus and they save them. We actually have one at 35. So within the next 7 years or so, 35 moves twice. Once to the courthouse, the federal courthouse on Camp Street, and they stay there for about 3 years. And once to the McDonough 41 campus, which is in the 1100 block of St. Anne, but you'll never see it. Because I don't know when it was torn down. It was after 1972, but it's now merged into Armstrong Park. Because even though I don't know how to do a geological survey, I know how to triangulate. I was a kid then, I was like 4, and I didn't really know. I didn't notice anything. All I knew was Jones School was down the street in the 7th floor. That was it. So for 7 years, McDonough 35 moved twice. Then comes 1972. Thank the Lord. We get a $3.2 million campus on Kellerick Street by the I-10 with no windows. It was the first school for 35 that was built for
For
us.
35.
And according to some of our graduates, it was a castle with no windows. I was like, why really there are no windows in the school? Now, 1972 starts the big thing. That's where a lot of people who know the 35 that we know it today, that's where they come from. That's when you started getting testing to get in, selective admission, and it wasn't easy. I had to compete with 2,000 kids. The year I went in 1981, I had to compete with 2,000 kids, I heard, to get 300 and something slots.
Really?
Yes. And not because it was, well, it was strenuous. Because it wasn't a citywide school, you could be from uptown, you could be from the east, you could be from the west wing. And you applied, and if you met the criteria, you got in.
Did you have to be an Orleans Parish resident?
I think you did, but I also happen to know we had a classmate who lived in Slidell. We didn't say anything because we didn't care. But in 1972, we moved into our building and we stayed happy there for 43 years. We improved our standing in the community. We produced more successful people. We got better with teaching the teachers. Our band got better. Our football team got better. And then, in fact, in 1992, or 93, I'm sorry, we were a Blue Ribbon School. And then came Katrina. While not damaging the building, enough, it seemed to set us on a course to where we are now. And that can be good and bad. We had outgrown the building, sadly. We outgrew it. We had a cafeteria, we had a gymnasium, we had an auditorium. We had a 1,500 seat auditorium. We don't have that in a new building. Don't ask me why. But we had outgrown the building. And Katrina seemed to be the thing to force us out. Except something happened. Our kids said, hell no, we ain't leaving. Sorry. And you're not shutting our school down. Because Orleans Parish, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Okay, feel free to jump in. Orleans Parish, and I was in Tennessee at the time. Orleans Parish said, we can't open up another school, but if you go charter, yeah, if you go charter, and the kids are like, no, sorry. If you go charter, you can go, and the kids said, nope. And Orleans Parish tried it again, and the kids said, no. And they tried it a third time in 2012, and the kids said, no. Yes, sir.
Immediately after the storm, there were a series of newspaper articles that talked about parents' meetings, and the topic was the charter school thing. So, if I remember those articles right, there had been one high school open.
It was McMahon.
McMahon. And the discussion was they didn't have the money, they didn't have the insurance, they didn't have whatever to open a second one. But McDonough 35 was able to get open, I believe, in January after Katrina.
Right.
And people got back into school that had come back into town. Now, was that, do you know where that money came from to get the school back up, Orleans Parish School Board? Or?
Again, if anybody knows how to build a time machine, I promise you, any place y'all want to drop off and get some other stuff, I'll take you with me. Part of my work as a historian is wishing I had a time machine. But as far as where the money came is something I would have to search records for. All I know is our kids, our parents, our community said you will not close 35. I would hate to say that it was based off of racism, but I know where I live. In the 10 years that 35 reopened, we were in a school. We were. I have the school performance scores to prove we were in a school, or at the worst, a low B. Then, whoever decided to start playing in 35 as at New Orleans as an all charter, started a process that didn't just affect 35. It affected McMahon. It affected other schools that were struggling just to get back. If you were passing, Orleans Parish had to manage you. Because RSD is the one that turned over their failing schools, which McMahon was not a failing school. My son graduated from McMahon in 2007, wasn't close to failing. So RSD had to transfer over their failing schools.
Do you think there is, so it's, McMahon is kind of peculiar because it's not like, 35 has that strong African American hold, but, McMahon, we kind of bust in McMahon. It was like, I know y'all was white before, but look.
I like that one.
We coming in here.
We coming in. What?
And we do have a strong Asian population in McMahon. So I think that's why McMahon kind of like skated by cause we a magnet school.
Magnet school.
Yeah.
Right, and 35 was a magnet school, but one thing, see, I'm gonna be honest about this, and this has nothing to do with racial discussion. I had half my teachers were Caucasian, and just fine with me. Now that was one that got on my nerves, but that wasn't because she was white. She was just getting on my nerves.
I had some white teachers got on my nerves.
I had some black teachers that got on my nerves. But I never saw the thing of not having an all-black school as a problem. Like, I had neighbors that went to McMain and we were all fine. So, but when I knew 35's unique place in history, and then compared it to McMain's, that's kind of when we started doing a little,
Yeah, it's like-
a little. But my son graduated in 2007, and you looked at who the top performing students were, which I was like, okay, most of the Asian community lives in the East.
Yes.
How they getting all the way?
Yes.
How they getting all the way over to McMain?
Yes.
Other than he that ambitious.
Yes. And that's the only, like, we had maybe one white person, well, and I went there 2008, 2009, when I forgot, but I graduated in 2011. We had like one Caucasian student. It was black and Asian, literally. That's it. That's it.
And
Black teachers, we had maybe 1 or 2 white teachers. That was
you
like,
might have had my son's one white algebra teacher. And not that that even bothers me, because when I had all 4 of my English classes at 35, I only had 1 black teacher. They were all female. I only had 1 black teacher. I remember every name of my teachers. Miss Knight, Miss Martin, Miss Meredith, Miss Conway. It didn't matter to me. Just as long as you ain't get on my last blip nerves. So there we are. We're fighting it again. We're like, you're not chartering our school. Then they start, and they know who they are.
yes.
They start cutting classes. They start firing teachers. They start reducing resources to where you now, even though we were still a C school.
Is this after Ms. Winfield came as a principal?
Yes!
Yeah.
And that was in 2014.
Right.
So they start cutting. They start making 35 sick on the inside. And we still surviving. Still I rise. Thank you, Miss Angela. 1 year our scores went up. That's when they poured it on. They fired 2 principals in a year. So we keep surviving. But then there's that vote that came on December 20th. I'm coming to you. That's that vote that came on December 20th, where they basically just said, we don't care how you feel. We're going to make the whole system charter. So starting in August of 2019, 35 effectively is no longer run by an Orleans Parish School Board system that didn't want us in the first place. Yes, I said it.
The they you talk about is the Orleans Parish School Board?
And RSD,
Okay.
and
I'm talking about RSD stands.
oh, Recovery School District, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Recovery School District, which was slightly pre-Katrina, but got a big old voter support from Bobby Jindal.
Yeah. You're telling us, UNO 90%. So,
Right.
You know, we're in
And my part is I was out for 6 years with Katrina, so I don't know exactly what Bobby Jindal did until I came back home and saw the
You messed
results.
it up.
Yeah, have a seat, we'll tell you all about it.
Well, this,
Did nothing good.
if you weren't around, you might not know this, but we've heard that, because what kind of started this project, we were specifically talking about the band. We heard that the band, pre-Katrina, didn't have uniforms.
They were okay.
They did have uniforms?
Some of them were molded, and I would not put my child in a molded uniform. But keep going.
And then after Katrina, they got uniforms, and we've seen their band budget, which is really a self-paid
Right.
way to get uniforms. There's an article, I think Rebecca found it, that talked about the band raising money after Katrina, about $54,000. Do you
The
know?
New Yorker? I saw one too. I was just coming back home and I saw that because I had been so out of contact. I do remember seeing it because the one thing I took for granted was the band was always going to be there. Because one of the pictures I'd love to show y'all while you're at the 35 campus on Keller Rec, they have an auditorium. The outside of the auditorium has these seats. It's like skybox seats. And if you manage to scramble your butt up there in time, you got to see the band practice in the skybox seats. So if you were a fast enough freshman, Because usually the juniors and seniors took them. And that's one of my favorite memories about 35. Don't get me wrong, I love my English courses, I love my history courses, I love my Spanish courses, but seeing the band march up and down on the blacktop from the skybox seats is still one of the best memories I've got of
So
high school.
there are students who would just voluntarily watch the band? Is that?
Not even just that, like it'd be after school, the band's practicing, and we'd all stay anyway. But the best place, like right here, imagine if the blacktop was here and UNO was marching. This is an absolutely perfect place because not only can you watch the band, you can see the lake. That was one of the privileges.
You're watching them practice.
Watching them practice. Watching them practice.
So can you talk to us about the band?
Oh yes, actually I can because a lot of people. I did play music, but I was not strong enough to march in the band. I just wasn't.
What did the band mean to you?
Well, I love music anyway. I started playing the flute when I was in 6th grade. And my father knew I was talented enough to march in 35's band. And if you were talented to march in 35's band, it meant you were a first-rate musician. Because our band director only took in the top. But I knew I didn't have the ambition. I wasn't waking up. The band would practice for an hour before school and for 2 hours after school.
Wow.
And Miss Ariane, did your father at St. Aug march for the Marching 100?
No, he was a baseball, but I dated people who marched for the one.
Oh, guess what? So did I. And we still gave him
I
hell.
ran to the front of the parade.
Right.
Yeah. that was
Well,
like people say, give back, give
The
back, give back.
band was kind of new to 30. The marching band was kind of new to 35. But once they got the right director,
When was this? When was it?
19, late 60s, late 60s. Lloyd L. Harris Jr.,
Right.
all hail.
And he's
is
still
the-
around.
Yes, he is. And he's like this tall. Lloyd L. Harris Jr. took kind of a ragtag group of musicians, dressed them up fine, taught them how to march, taught them how to play both classical music and contemporary music. And whether St. Aug admits it or not, they know who the better band is.
That was the thing, because the music was both classical and
Classical.
popular.
Also, just side note, how many of you have heard of the song Groove City? And if you have not, okay,
Yeah.
our band director was the producer and writer of that song for the group Chocolate Milk.
You mean this, Mr. Harris?
I don't know.
And every band head knew it. I didn't know it until 2017.
Yeah.
And I was like, wait a minute, the same group that we've been singing forever, that was your song? And he was like, yeah. I was like, but Mr. Harris is like supremely passionate about music. I don't know why this man's still teaching.
Teaching little kids too.
Teaching little kids. He's this tall and he gets on the floor with them. I wrote that article too. It's the coolest thing. And the one thing you knew about Mr. Harris is when it was time for the band to be announced, this is how he would do it. I will never forget it. Ladies and gentlemen, the members of the McDonough 35 Senior High School Ron Eagle Marching Band. That is how he said it on the announcements. That is how he had it introduced at the games. And if you did not know that the McDonough 35 Senior High School Ron Eagle Marching Band wasn't marching down the street, he would yell it again.
It'd be great to have a recording of that for the.
I bet you I'll go.
Do you have a recording of it?
I'm going to find it. Somebody's got it.
Wouldn't that be fantastic to have an exhibit? Yeah.
You know what? Some of the band heads do have their collections.
Some of the what?
We
What'd
call
you
them
say,
band
band
heads. Band heads.
Okay, that's good. Band heads.
The band members, especially the ones who worship the ground that Lloyd L. Harris Jr. walks on to this day, they still want him to teach over there. And he's like, gotta give me some classical musicians.
Yeah.
Like, okay.
See, that's the thing about New Orleans music that people seem to not understand when they're just writing about music. They don't being music is what I teach and what I got my degree in is music.
Oh,
And you don't just play, in New Orleans, these teachers taught them classical music. They taught them to read. They taught them to play all
and
kinds
I
of
can't
genres
read
of music.
I still can't read music.
These bands were amazing. These kids were trained. Ms. Yvonne Bush and those people, I mean, they
No,
were
okay, that's a new
serious.
name to me, but-
Clark, yeah, she was at Clark.
You
during
keep
the same
saying
time.
the word, do they not do that anymore?
Nope.
No.
Let me put it
There's
this
no money
way.
to pay the teachers.
Even the Roots of Music, which is a group that's trying to get bands back into the schools, the ones that they allow to stay open.
Jason Patterson and that,
Okay. And on Derek Tabb.
yeah.
Classical music just doesn't appeal to some kids, even though it will teach you how to play the chords within popular music. So the struggle is just to get kids to understand that classical music has a place. It is a wonderful foundation to learn.
Do you think, I have a question, do you think it was, I mean, the way it was with me is, you want to be in that band so bad, even if you didn't want to do what the band leader wanted you to learn, you learned it anyway to get to be
To get-
one of those guys in the band. Was that true in your school, do you think?
Well, I graduated in '85, and we were raised on classical music along with contemporary music, and so we were okay with it. We didn't question.
Yeah, okay, maybe that was it.
But today, I just don't see where that zeal or that importance to teach classical foundation is anymore.
Oh, I was just gonna say, like, kids now, they like cranking and doing southern and all that.
And a lot of kids, I only say that my son is 30. He has a good background with music. But I can't stand bounce music. And that's what the kids want to play. I'm like, there is no musicality to bounce music unless I'm not hearing correctly.
Well, what used to happen back for years, 300 years now in New Orleans, the young kids would play something that the older people hated, but if you learn a foundation of classical music, how to read, you're flexible and you're more hireable.
Right.
You can get a job on the riverboats back in the day. You get a job, and it served you well. And when jazz came in, when ragtime came in, they thought, oh, these kids are going crazy, Mexican music. But you had that background of classical music. I'm worried about this new thing where they're not investing. The city invests in music,
But
that we sell it to the tourists, but they're not
But they're
paying
not
for the
getting-
infrastructure. Yeah.
so the 35-story, while not ending, will take a drastic turn come August. Because there's still so many holes I need to fill, and graduates need to fill. And I know a lot of my learners are like, well, of course it's not like it was when I was there. Well, of course not. You were there 50 years ago. It's not supposed to be like it was when you were there. These kids are digital. They're multicultural. It's like we were not. We grew up in a rather insular community. I didn't go to school with white kids until I went to college. My son can tell you he has had multicultural classmates his entire life. I'm like, cool. I want to do a little bragging on some things because you talked about the band. I'm more of a football person. You might not be able to see it very well, but believe it or not, our first black mayor, Dutch Morial, I was told played football. And I'm looking, I'm like, Dutch Morial don't stand but this tall. It's like he played football. And then his son said, he played quarterback. I was like, really? I said, I want that picture. I know y'all got that picture. So you're not going to be able to see it real well, but this is from a 1948 paper. The little circle that you see right here is Dutch Morial.
He played for McDonald's?
He went to school 1 year for 35, but he will tell you, when he comes back to us from the spirit world, that he should have just gone to 35. I don't know what trouble he got into at Xavier.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
Again, time machine. But yes, Dutch Morial, our city's first black mayor, played football. So y'all can pass that down. How many of y'all liked homecoming in high school?
I did.
Anybody was in the homecoming court? Okay. While other schools in the city had homecoming for like 20 years, 35 did not get its first homecoming until 1955, but this is the first program
This is going
in color even.
at Dillard's Athletic Field.
And I grew up around Dillard. I still don't know where the athletic field is. I mean, I live within walking distance of Dillard. I still don't know where the athletic field is.
The McDonald 35 Ironmen.
Oh yeah, that's another story.
Just saying.
That's another story. See, the problem is when you have 102 years of history, you got a bunch of stories you can tell.
Crazy Legs and Blockbuster.
Yeah.
That's great.
I do
That's
think one of those gentlemen is still alive.
Really?
In 1992, our school celebrated our 75th anniversary, and a lot of kids when I say kids, from the 20s, 30s, 40s came back to talk about what is in school. And I was wondering, I wish Ariana was here because there's something that says Yvonne Osborne Williams says our greatest teacher was Mr. Carpenter. And it talks about a lot. Have y'all heard of Morris Jeff, or at least the school Morris Jeff?
What's it feel?
He's a 35 grad. And a lot of my alumni like to talk about, oh, well, we have this grad and this grad and this grad. And I was like, y'all do understand that our future grads, nutty as they are, we never know where a superstar is going to come from. So we know that Jackie Robinson was the first African American to sign a contract with the major leagues. There was a second, and he came from New Orleans.
He came from McDonald 35?
No.
These are his stats. His name is Johnny Wright.
He was the second.
He was the second, and I have the copy of the article. And his career was short, but hey, let's face it. If you tell me in 1947 I'm going to the major leagues, I don't care if it's 2 days. I'll get
Coffee, yeah.
and that's his stats.
Well, now who? Yeah. What league?
Well, he was with the Negro Leagues first, but I forgot what team
Correct.
he signed with. But he did meet Jackie Robinson. He actually met Jackie Robinson, and that's why I want the time machine so I can see that moment. I'm one of these people. I do this a lot.
Somebody get this woman a time machine.
What's that?
Yeah, somebody please give me a time machine.
That's pretty cool, so.
I'm trying to see, there was something else.
And,
Oh, this is what I need Ariana for, because her father, the proud St. Aug person. I don't know when he graduated. I would dare say we're probably about the same age.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yes, we're probably around the same age.
Should be back.
Now, 35 has not always had the greatest of athletes because academics was always stressed. And one of our favorite rivalries is still St. Aug. And for years and years, 35 used to have their butts handed back. Well, in my sophomore year, we beat them 41-6.
Wow.
And because at one time it was St. Aug that was known as the king of black football in New Orleans, but for 3 years it was 35.
Oh, wow. And I mean, they beat them bad.
And like I said, that's why I want to know how old is her father, because if he was anywhere near St. Aug between the early to late, anywhere in the 80s, he'll remember that one. And we had no practice field. Nowhere for coaches to study film. Who you see on there, Coach Kennedy, the clean-shaven gentleman, and Coach Mack, they wrote on a ping pong table. They drew their plays on a ping pong table. I should have got that ping pong table.
Yeah, that'd be great.
And I just tell people, like, y'all don't know what I used to see. That's why I want my time machine. So there's just, I mean, my thing is, I don't know how much I helped because
You helped a bunch.
Oh
it's,
my gosh, yeah. You should see this
Oh,
treasure
okay.
chest she has here.
this is a resolution from Dutch Morial, to Max Spears, proclaiming April 8th as Max Spears Day. And I did not teach that to my kids. And I was supposed to. And when Dr. Spears died in 1988, Phil Johnson, for those of us who know WWL News,
Yeah.
did a beautiful
Oh.
editorial. And if I ever get the video of it, I'm gonna be straight. The thing is, it's just,
Oh, this is really beautiful.
it's it's been exhausting. It will continue to be exhausting, and as long as I lose my little weight and can keep chasing after history, especially my kids, because I'm very proud to say that we have had 2 young women in the last 2 years who have earned scholarships of over $200,000.
Wow.
Now, it's not the kind that says, I have 113 acceptances with $97 gazillion. Okay? But when you can earn one $200,000 scholarship,
Yeah.
that's worth it to me. I know the trend is, let's celebrate the kids who have got accepted to 50 colleges with 17 full rides and $3.5 million. Okay, I got that. But how many kids do that? And 35 is full of kids who can do that. But a lot of our more successful graduates are just those regular people who haven't gone to jail yet. Who we just love our school. Our band director, Mr. Lawrence Rawlins, both of his parents graduated from 35, and his father was a drum major. I really want that picture. Because Mr. Lawrence is this tall, and Mr. Lawrence's older brother is this tall.
Oh my goodness.
And I'm like, okay, somewhere in the middle is their father. We've had the first mayor, the first black mayor, the first black city council, the first black state judge, and whatever first black. And Chief Harrison. Please don't get mad at me. Michael Harrison is a 35 grad.
And what was his position? What was his accomplishment here in town?
Well, he was the last police chief before Ferguson took over.
Okay.
But I didn't know he was around either. In fact, he was a drum major. I'm still trying to figure out how that went. This is just a teacher picture. Delvin Breaux, who played for the Saints for a while, is a 35 grad. He had the neck injury that should have killed him. As he said, it should have
Right.
killed him. A lot of our graduates now aren't the first to do something or the second or even the 10th, but you can't tell them I'm not important. I mean, I think my only important thing is that I can talk a lot about 35. Wait till I get my money.
Can we ask you some questions?
Y'all can ask me anything.
Is that, go ahead.
Hopefully I know.
They, before you came, we even had questions for you.
So they're switching to charter in August of this year?
Yes, they are.
Is the name, do you know the name change, or is it just an?
Oh, there will be no name change.
It's an agreement?
If you really want to see a fight where people start, now I promise you, after all, because believe it or not, the original name on the building that 35 occupied was called McDonough 13, and they didn't want that. So the next school number in line was 35. So they moved 35 into a 35-year-old building. I don't think they saw the irony. But no, there will be no name change. There will be no color change. There will be no mascot change. Because if they want to fight, then I'd have to be like, Lord, please.
Why do you think you feel that way? Why do you think?
Well, here's the thing. In 1979, when I was a 12-year-old kid living in the Claiborne corridor, and you could walk through alleys of houses and not get kidnapped. That's how I first got interested in 35. I was a 7th grade kid who was looking to see what high school she was going to go to. Didn't want to go to Catholic school. Sorry, all the Catholic school grads. And I heard 35's band play. And we all up there. One of my neighbors was like, you could go there. So 2 years later, I applied and got in.
So the band is what
The
you
band
had.
got me
The
in.
band got you in.
The band got me in.
Well, what did it mean?
I knew.
What do you think McDonough meant, like to people when you'd say?
I don't know if McDonough. I don't know if the
McDonough
name.
35.
Oh, what 35 meant was your mother or your grandmother may have graduated from 35. If you figure I entered 35 in 1981. At the time, 35 had just kind of turned 60. So you had graduates who were alive from 1920s that could still tell their stories. So when people said, oh yeah, I remember y'all was on that little rinky building on South Rampart, which it went over my head with that one. I was like, what are you talking about? This is the only place this building has ever been. And what it meant to the living graduates was they outlasted racism, sexism, classism, economicism. I don't know how many isms they had to fight, but they outlasted it all.
So it's a symbol of that.
Right, it was like, I say this is gonna sound kind of funny, but in an ecosystem you have all these components that's supposed to help work together. For 35's first 20 years, we were the ecosystem. And I think that's what bothers me about what has happened is that, are you telling me that a school that has produced a councilman, a school board member, a judge, this, that, and the other, there are 3 Ron Eagles who are sitting on judges' benches. I was like, you mean to tell me we outlasted all of this? 2 hurricanes, 4 moves. And this is what you reduce us to? See, she got the perfect face on for how, because I'll be like, God, see, I sit on the board of directors for the Alumni Association, so I got to be like, oh, this ain't gonna work. I want to say what I want to say. I'm gonna catch you doing.
Do you think that when it transitions to charter school, the programs that are so important to McDonough 35, the band, the football team, the baseball team, and any other program you can think of, will they transfer as well? Will they follow McDonough 35, or are they going to have to fight for funding?
They've been fighting for funding for the last 12 years.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, it is my unscientifically true fact that I think we will have to continue fighting for funding because we will not have a 10th grade, which I don't understand how you don't have a 10th grade. 35, for those who are familiar with sports, you have class 5A, 4A. Well, 35 was 4A. Well, now that the new structure of academics, we're not having a 10th grade.
You're
we
not
have
gonna
been
have a
knocked
10th
out.
grade? It's just gonna be a junior,
It's going to be a 9th grade, 11th grade, 12th grade.
Where's it?
what's the 10th
Are
grade?
they gonna add it? Grad?
Well, see, what's going to happen is there's going to be a year where there's practically no class. So that when the class of 2021 graduates, there's kind of not going to be a class of 2022, but there'll be a class of 2023. Now, ask me how that works. So because of that, we got knocked down to 3A,
Well, that's,
which means all the rivalries that we had before, except for St. Aug, because they know that's a big money maker and they don't want to lose that money.
wait, you're gonna be a 12th grade, 11th grade, and a 9th grade?
Yep.
That's a setting you up to fail. That is,
Or they
my
gonna
dad's a
try
school
again. Excuse me, I
superintendent, let me tell you
don't want to
something.
crack my knuckles on that.
My dad's a school superintendent, I'll tell you what, they're setting you up to be closed the 3rd year.
And that's why I need my money. That's why I need to be a billionaire, half a billionaire. We'll get it done. But yeah, I'm like, okay, I'm not the smartest cookie in the jar, but I can smell a con. And my husband's a Marine, and he can smell it even faster.
Do you think,
There you go.
Everybody's Marine.
I meant to tell you
Everybody's a
that.
Marine.
He's a
Oh!
Marine too.
Simplify.
Okay, you write that down, so because we're gonna have to take a picture, because he's gonna be like, "You met a Marine?" Yes.
do you feel that the change to the charter is gonna mark the end of McDonough's, great 100-year
Oh
legacy?
hell no.
Or you think they're still gonna, I
Yeah,
just from what you're saying, I see that we foresee, problems within the school once this switch comes to charter that people are gonna have to fight through. So do you think is this just gonna be part of the whole history of McDonough, or is this marking a new history?
Oh, it's gonna mark. We're not worried about new history. What we're worried about is, can we still have a history of greatness, resources, students, teachers? Can we have it healthily? I'm just gonna say this. There are certain schools that have been assured that their great legacies will stand strong. They keep messing with 35. It's like, they don't know who they fighting. But no. What's going to happen is we're just going to have to discover new fighting skills.
You discussed this, you have this really evocative imagery with ecosystems and Fusebox and
Oh, that's right. I love that.
Fuseboxes.
Fuse box.
Yeah, he loved that too.
Yeah,
Thank
that
you.
really appealed to me, and I guess to
I'm going to have to
follow
give
on
that to
with
my
the-
husband gave me that word, so the Marine gave me that word. Go ahead.
To follow up with like what Connie was saying, do you think that linkage to the New Orleans community at large is that that charterization is going to destroy that linkage?
No.
That Fusebox or ecosystem or
What'll happen, what I kind of see happening is that now that some of our alumni, our parents know what the change is going to be, now we have to adapt. I mean, so you adapt to survive.
Mhm.
My son had the fortune of not going to McMain in a charter school environment, but this is going to be the first generation of kids to graduate from a whole charter system, whether you're for it or not.
Mhm.
That is what they've graduated from. Some have had a good experience. Some have not. The ones who have not had a good experience have really not had a good experience. Because school closures, I don't care what he says, school closures are not normal. Imagine if UNO shut down. I do know this for a fact. I love SUNO, but I happen to know it is UNO that keeps the economic engine of this city in check, analyzed, and everything else. I knew that, and I've known that since I was a teenager. So will it symbolize, what will it symbolize? It'll just symbolize one more fight we got to do. We are 102 years strong. We just gotta adapt our strategies. Because I could talk forever about football and science and lovely ladies of McDonough 35, for which I am not one of them. But no, when I say lovely ladies, for the longest time as I researched the yearbooks, I saw that most of the top students were girls. And so my son said, well, Mom, why are boys not smart? I was like, first of all, you smart, don't even go there. Second, young black men have often had this thing where I gotta go to school, I gotta go to work, I gotta go serve, I got something. Education seems interrupted. So why does it seem that more girls get the kind of top academic honors? Because we just don't have those interruptions. They said, you're a Marine. I read a story about a kid at 35 who joined in 1942, much to the objection of his mother. Came back in 43, took him a long time to graduate. His mother was barely alive when he graduated. And that's just kind of the story of young black men in education altogether. But for 35, it was different because it was the only public high school at the time, at the start of the United States entering World War II. So I tell my young ladies, yes, you can do this, and I have to tell my young men, yeah, you can do it. I gotta kind of spur them on a little more because they're so used to not being seen as these academic leaders. Which I'm like, I beg your little pardon. In order to succeed in football with 25 seconds to get in the huddle, remember the play, get to the line, don't get offside, snap the ball and execute the play, that takes a high level of intelligence. So I kind of want them to think like that, but I don't always get it. They'll grow up, I hope. If anybody has any other questions, I'll be glad to. It can be as I shouldn't say silly, but whether you think it's silly, I want to answer it.
It's not a question, but go ahead.
It's a silly one.
It's not silly.
What year
I've
did
taught
your
for
brother
20.
graduate, McMahon?
Yeah, he graduated. 93.
93. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah,
And he
I was
went to
there.
NOVA too.
I was there with him.
Oh, wait, then you really gonna have to write that. I'm gonna give y'all exchange names. The funny thing is my brother's hair is kind of like yours, not really wild and curly.
Uh-huh.
But no,
That's the class.
I love studying about New Orleans schools. My parents and my in-laws graduated from Clark. And that story is kind of
They would
depressing.
know Miss Bush. She's the band leader at Clark.
It doesn't have to be, put like this, it can be anything y'all want to know because, again, I have information on football, science, the band, this. My husband says, I think you love 35 more than you love me. I was like, I don't have to cook for 35 and I don't have to listen to your bad jokes. I don't have to listen to 35's bad jokes.
Reese don't tell bad jokes.
Yes, they do.
Oh, yeah, they did. Oh, yeah, I was married to one too.
They tell wonderful stories that make me scratch my head. But
I think if it's okay, if we can break up where the exhibit people might want to come and talk to her. We have 3 groups, 4 groups,
Cool.
where we're doing oral histories, they're doing podcasts, and they're also doing an exhibit about McDonough 35. I think some of them may want to come and speak to you about some of your materials and so that. But one thing that strikes me is everybody hears, not everybody, but a lot, you hear about McDonough 35, you talk about the band, You talk about it being a public school versus St. Augustine, was it Catholic school? You hear about it being the first black high school after Reconstruction. They had before, but after Reconstruction. I have never heard about 2,000 people applying and only 300 slots.
Well, it's a general number. If you figure in the early 80s, you had all these kids that could apply for so many slots at
Yeah,
schools.
yeah.
Because before it was a centralized system, which meant you went to the school you wanted to apply.
Oh, I understand that part. What I'm saying is, I think it's interesting how selective the admission is, and
Oh,
that
yes.
story does not come out. It's like you would think it's a public school, anybody who walks in the door gets to
Yeah.
come in. No, not even half, not even a sixth got to come, less than a
Right, less than a
sixth got to
sixth.
get in.
If you
This is a reputation. Why do you think it's interesting that that's not the first thing we know about McDonough 35? It was very difficult to get in.
It was, and I will tell people, I came from a very small Catholic school. My 8th grade class had 44 kids between 2 classes. I had other friends who came from Gregory, which was in Gentilly, Lakeview, whatever you want to call it, off of Miracle. And they had bigger schools. Andrew J. Bell, Livingston, Woodson. Because see, I didn't go to a traditional middle school. I went from 1st through 8th, which meant I had to compete with kids I didn't know existed. And my freshman year class was 315 people. So I went from here.
Well, it could have been 2,000 if they'd let everybody
If they had
in.
let everybody in, I went from here.
It was for several years, but 1981.
Well, what it is that when 35 first opened, anybody could come in because that was the school that was suddenly going to open the doors for kids in New Orleans.
But remember, 700 people came in. It was a school built for less than half that.
Less than half that. And for younger children.
Yeah.
Then when Booker T was built, you still had that number, testing wasn't an issue. I don't even recall when testing became an issue of admittance. What I do know was that if I wanted to go to 35, I had to pass the test. That was it. It was the same with Warren Easton. It was the same with McMain. It was the same with Ben Franklin, and I can't remember the other school. But yes, you had a small number of schools that, yes, you had to test to get in. And we didn't look on it, on it as elitist. We just knew
It's because you got in. It's
This is
because
how you
didn't
got
get
in.
You thought of it as a leader.
I didn't even think of it as a test when I was taking it. I was like, oh, okay.
The testing ended when it opened after Katrina, right? Because it had to accept whoever was back in town.
And the only reason I'm doing like that is one of the better things that had come out of Katrina and getting 35 open was that we had a 7th and 8th grade component. Now we had, like what McMain had, you could have a student come in year after year after year, grow a program.
Yeah.
There are a few
Cannot get
kids
right
at
to
35
programs.
right now who can say, I've been here since 7th grade. I'm like, okay. I would not have, I had to stay in Catholic school from 1st to 8th grade, and by the time I got to 6th grade, I was tired. So if I stayed at the same school for 6 years, I must have wanted to be there. But it was a freer system. And after seeing yesterday's stories with all the one app results or non-results, because I have a friend who put down 12 schools for her child and got a goose egg. I'm like, how you get 0 out of 12? And then they told her resubmit. She was like, why would I resubmit so I can get another 0 out of 12? Because I don't understand the matrix that is one app. I think I'd rather perform brain surgery.
Yeah, you don't know what parameters is going by, but it
Well,
makes you
the parameters they say are geography,
yeah.
zip code, and sibling. My sister graduated My sister went to 35 too. She didn't get into 35 because her brilliant older sister went there. She got in there because she tested her butt off and got in there. My sister has a way higher GPA than I do. I was like, my sister didn't get in because I was there. My sister got in because she worked her butt off.
Well, that's fascinating to me, that part of the story. But anyway, well, thank you.